The people surrounding a drag performance are being murdered, which is as close to ripped from the headlines as Midsomer Murders will ever get. This week, we're talking about obsession.
The history of drag.
And what's going on with D.S. Winter on this episode of
Welcome to Midsomer.
Hello, and welcome to Midsomer, the podcast where we dissect all the mysteries, the murders, and the many weird things about the long-running hit TV show, Midsomer Murders. I'm your host, Eric Buscher, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Eileen Becker. Hey, Eileen, happy birthday!
Thanks, Eric. Today we are talking about Dressed to Kill, the fourth episode of the 23rd series. It originally aired January 2nd, 2023. It was directed by Leon Lopez and written by Maria Ward. Let's work!
Spoiler warning, we will be discussing the events of this episode, including the identity of the murderer. So if you haven't watched it yet and don't want to know who done it, pause this and go watch it. We will still be here when you get back.
Has anyone ever told you you have perfect bone structure and buttocks like coconuts?
In the village of Elverton-cum-Lafferty, Lois Springfield is annoyed that a charity drag show is in the same pub on the same night as her annual dominoes tournament. After she tells the performers that she thinks drag is a bad image for women, and then gets called a Karen, appropriately, she wanders into the back of the pub where someone she knows knocks her out with a glittery pink stiletto. When Barnaby and an overly polite Winters arrives, Lois is dead. Her body is stuffed into a parody of a drag outfit with dominoes covering her eyes. The postmortem reveals she died from asphyxiation, tied so tight into a corset that the breath was literally squeezed out of her. Even more revealing, Fleur says she used to be one half of a drag act under the name Ava Heartburn. The pub is owned by Jill Templeton, and the drag show is a fundraiser for her son Rocco, who is suffering from leukemia. Rocco? Jill is trying to get him to a Florida clinic for a new treatment. Unfortunately, when organizing the show, the only date available was the same as the domino tournament, and the village has a lot of serious domino heads, including the deceased. The body was found by Chantel, a young woman who works at the pub. The detectives talk to the drag performers. Nigel was a famous Shakespearean actor, or Thesp, before too much success and booze went to his head and he was banned from the West End. Now he's doing the drag show to make money and raise his profile. Then there's Malik, a recent transplant from London to escape his broken heart. He's the organizer and the MC as Ophelia Crotchet. Finally, there are locals Evelyn, who worked for Lois at the local dry cleaner, and Chan's dad Sean, a handyman. None of them were Lois's biggest fans, and Malik even told Lois that it could be arranged to have dominoes in her eyes. He also wore the same size shoe that hit Lois, but he claims to be all mouth, no trousers, and that pink is too tacky for him anyways. You know who they all do like? Winter. Apparently he has buttocks like coconuts. There are other suspects. Doctor and domino enthusiast Dickie Dent. Dickie? Was also fighting with Lois. He claims he was out biking at the time of the murder. What about Nigel's mom, Norinda, another of Lois's domino enemies? There's also Olivia Dent, Dickie's wife. She's a drama teacher and the town treasurer with hopes of putting on Romeo and Juliet with Nigel in the lead. Nigel? But he keeps brushing her off. Maybe it has to do with the troubling letter he receives? Back at headquarters, Winter tries to bring up his annual review with Barnaby. Oh, that's why he's being polite. Barnaby avoids the subject and instead discusses how Malik and the drag show have been attacked online by a troll. They also found a strip of cloth on a window in the pub indicating someone snuck in. They traced the troll's account back to Rocco's phone. He claims his phone was stolen and that he didn't see anything during the murder. His mother seems to have total control over Rocco's life in an effort to keep him safe. Rocco's long-gone father had an affair with Lois, but Jill claims to have buried that hatchet a long time ago. Poor choice of words. Besides, she's a little busy having her own affair with Dickie Dent. That strip of cloth belonged to Chan. Turns out she snuck in to see Rocco, her secret boyfriend. Evelyn goes to the laundromat and finds it trashed with the word thief scrawled in detergent. She tells the detectives she's worried she might be next because she worked there, and Lois seemed to know all of the town's dirty laundry. Barnaby finds a piece of paper with city names on it. Later, Evelyn has an intense conversation with Nigel about the letter he received. Malik receives blackmailing texts saying they know what he did. He walks to meet his blackmailer, only to have a black van attempt to run him down. Before we get into the episode, let's have a little tourist info. Eileen, can you tell us about Elverton-cum-Latterly?
Elverton-cum-Latterly is a lovely village known for its domino competition and large supermarket. It has a lovely coffee and wine truck, and its residents have healthy sexual appetites, as seen in the classic episode Country Matters. Plus, now it has a cutting-edge drag show. You kind of have to wonder what happened to those little kids in Country Matters.
So we are, normally when we do this show, we record it a few weeks ahead of time, spend some time editing it, but we are trying to rush this one out because this is the most recent episode of Midsomer to air. This just came out this month on Acorn. And we wanted to find something in the new batch of episodes to discuss, and we're going to talk about Dress to Kill. I also feel that it's important to put this episode in a certain context, because it's hard not to talk about this episode without talking about the rise in attacks on LGBTQ plus people in America. Currently, in 2022, there were over 124 incidents, including the shooting at a drag event at Club Q in Colorado that left 5 people dead and 25 people injured. It's not just the U.S. Hate crimes are also on the rise in the U.K. According to government data, that for the calendar year ending in March 22, there was a 41% increase in hate crimes based on sexual orientation and a 56% increase against transgender people. So I think it's really important to talk about this episode because it doesn't occur in a vacuum.
That is correct. Yeah.
Now, this episode would have been filmed over the summer, I believe, June and July. And the shooting at Club Q happened, I believe, in November. But this still occurred. This filming, the writing, all of it would have occurred within the rise of these attacks. So why do you think they decided to do this as subject matter for the episode?
With the new changeover in people that happened basically 10 seasons ago, there has been a definite effort on the part of the producers to be more inclusive. They are obviously showing a lot more people of color, including in the main cast. And this seems to fit into their portrait of a modern Britain. It is more diverse, not only with ethnicity, but also, and this started, let's face it, with the first episode where we had the Dennis Rainbird, who is implied very strongly to be gay.
We've talked about it when we talked about the first episode. They flat out, Troy basically makes anti-gay statements. There has been a smattering of LGBTQ characters throughout Midsomer, but I would say that the thing with this is that this is a very specific drag shows right now. They are controversial in a way that they haven't been in a long time. There's a lot of protests about them. There has been a lot of anti-gay, anti-trans sentiment directed at drag shows. And obviously there's real world violence directed towards the performers. So for them to kind of set an episode around it, to have murders around a drag show, as I leaned to it's like, that's a Law and Order thing. That's a ripped from the headlines style crime that Midsomer doesn't that's not what Midsommer's known for. Like, no one's, being beaten with wheels of cheese in the real world. And if there are, God help us.
Yeah.
I also don't think of Midsomer as a message show. Yes, they've been spending a lot of time in the last 10 years trying to increase the diversity of performers and characters. But it's hard not to have a murder at a drag show and not feel like there should be some kind of message or theme, which I don't think this episode really has.
It ends up not really having much to do with the drag show at all, and drag or LGBTQ and its resolution, which we will talk about. And like you said, I think there was an attempt to bring something very topical that is happening to Midsomer, which does feel a little out of place. But we've come a long way from Troy being, as Tom Barnaby once said, as politically correct as a Nuremberg rally, to Winter basically being part of the show, even though he's just taking around his bucket and being sung to by a drag queen, and at the end agreeing to being in the next drag show with Fleur.
I think there's a lot to talk about with Winter
Yeah.
a little
And
later on.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later.
I feel, though, that that's like sort of them sort of weaseling out of having to make, where this sentiment, the anti-drag sentiment is coming from is definitely from an anti-gay prejudice.
Mhm.
And they dance around that quite a lot in this episode. Like, no one is anti-gay. It's like, I don't like drag, or I think drag is a poor choice. It shows women in a bad light, or it's not masculine.
Yeah.
But it's, the reality is that a lot of people who are going to protest would say have larger anti-gay sentiments or prejudices. That I think it's interesting that they dance around it in a way that felt, we want to have this, we want to have it be about, we want to have something fun and visually cool like a drag show, but we don't actually want to talk about like the real world stuff that's going on with that. And I feel like, I don't know, I feel it's like them trying to have their cake and eat it too.
Yeah, it does touch on it. And then there is that one scene with Malik describing when he's confronted by his past. And I do think that scene is very effective. But it does divorce, and not all drag is done by gays, which we'll talk about when we do the history. But it seems to divorce it a lot more than it really is from the LGBTQ community.
Yeah, like I actually thought that the way they, like with Malik and his character, I thought it was a really kind of nice portrayal of a multifaceted LGBT character. He's not all good, he's not all bad. I'm not saying that Midsomer shouldn't have an episode set like with a drag show. I just feel like if you're going to have it in the world that we're currently at now, there's a lot of implications that there's a lot of stuff in there that you need to either address more head on,
yeah,
or maybe don't do this now.
Yeah,
because it's especially watching this in the aftermath of the Club Q shooting.
Yeah, it comes off as not quite committed to it in some ways. The trolling is, as we will find out in the second half, is not done actually as an anti-gay, anti-drag thing. It had a very different motive. Midsomer is not reality. We've acknowledged that many times. And this is an attempt to bring some of modern day reality to Midsomer without completely committing to it. It has a weird, it's Midsomer entering the 21st century.
Yeah.
It's not always successful at it. I mean, they use the term Karen, which is all, very, very current. And then Barnaby's awkward use of the initialism OTT for over the top, like a teenage girl, just didn't work for me at all. There's a lot with cell phones and social media and trolling that we've never really had before. I mean, they still look at somebody's social media,
yeah,
as part of the investigation, but this is much more social media focused. And it works in some instances and doesn't in others.
I agree totally. Midsomer is trying to figure out its way in a 21st century world. I feel like this episode is like 50% there. I feel like, at least in trying to touch on things like drag shows and bringing it into like a more inclusive world, but to have murder at a drag show, and for that, especially in a world where that is happening in real life.
Yeah.
It is a little more ripped from the headlines that I really want from Midsomer. And it's and if they're gonna do it, they need to make their first message episode. They need to go all in, or otherwise it's just this, like I've watched this episode a couple times to prep for this, and
Mhm.
like the first time it just felt weird to me. The second or third time I saw a little more nuances to it, but overall it
Mhm.
just still felt like, but there's a big elephant in this room that they are desperately trying to dance around,
Yeah.
and but you can't. You really can't with this.
Yeah. I enjoyed it a lot more the first time because I thought there was a lot of fun to it. Fleur is a lot of fun, and I think in the first 3 episodes that they've shown of this season, she was much more muted, and I love a good Fleur episode. Uh,
Yeah.
and we will talk about the rest of the season later, which I think has had a lot of positives to it. Uh, and I think, and we will talk about more about Winter in this one. The change that we've gone through from Troy to Jamie Winter has been huge as far as his acceptance of people who are not like him, basically.
Yeah. So there was obviously there's a, like, right off the bat, there is a strange kill when we see Lois get smacked in the face with a pink glittery pump.
And the fact that she is basically strangled by a corset is also very weird.
Yeah.
So there's 2 very weird elements to this one.
Yeah, and then of course, like, she's all like covered, which kind of goes into sort of the whole hate crime nature of it, because the killer puts her in this very weird parody, disturbed version of a drag costume,
Hmm.
which does give it sort of this whole theme is like, well, is this a hate crime or not?
Yeah.
That they never really address.
Yeah. Why would you do that if she could have easily killed her in any other way?
Yeah.
Because as we find out, the motive has nothing to do with drag or with gay
Yeah.
people or with well, I mean a little bit with performance, but it's
Yeah.
so
She has
it seems like a misdirection that does not seem in keeping with the character who ends up being the murderer.
right, and especially as we see that character has conventional weapons real handy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Shall we talk about the cast highlights? Because there was a lot of relative newcomers in this episode.
And I thought it was a very interesting cast because there are some things that they do with this cast that was very unusual, and we will talk about that. LJ Dawson played Chantel Dawlish. This is her second major TV appearance after an episode of Doctors. She also worked as a talent PA on the show Marriage, which means she worked closely with stars Sean Bean and Nicola Walker. I hope she learned a lot working from them, especially Sean Bean, who can give her lots of death scene tips. This is Felix Kai's film debut, playing Malik Payne. They are a 2022 graduate of the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama, where he worked in a number of productions. One of the most notable was playing the lead Song Liling in M. Butterfly, the play about a French diplomat in China who begins a relationship with a Peking opera singer, unaware the singer is actually a man. The affair and subsequent marriage lasts 20 years, with the diplomat remaining either unaware or unwilling to see the truth, and Song spying on him for the Chinese government.
I really thought Felix was great in this episode. For a first timer, he showed a lot of screen charisma, and I really enjoyed his performance as Malik.
I did too. The scene where he's confronted with his past, he brings so much honesty to it. It was really touching, and to me, that was the strongest scene in the show. Next, we have another newcomer. Baxter Westby was sickly Rocco Templeton. He's relatively young with only a few credits. His first role was young Charlie on Casualty, but one of his most notable was playing Prince Edward in a production of Richard III starring Ray Fiennes that was filmed for the National Theatre Live. According to his LinkedIn page, and yes, he has one, he recently graduated from the Mount View Academy of Theater Arts, and he currently works at a nonprofit that provides services to help enable people with disabilities, which makes a lot of sense when we get to some of the other characters. Tessie Orange Turner played Evelyn Hardy. She appeared on Doctors, Casualty, The Other One, and the film You, Me, and Him. Orange Turner is also an illustrator who, according to her website, combines hand-drawn and hand-painted pieces with digital elements to express themes around identity and womanhood, usually focusing on women of the global majority. You can check out her work on Instagram and her website, turningorange.com.
Nicola McAuliffe was Norinda Bellamy. McAuliffe has a long career on the stage. In 1988, she won the Olivier Award for the lead in Kiss Me, Kate. She was nominated again in 2003 for her role in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Her most prominent TV role was the lead in a show called Surgical Spirit, which ran for a number of years in the early 90s, where she played an acid-tongued doctor. Seems like it's a precursor for House. She also appeared in Coronation Street, Doctors, Victoria, The Man Who Fell to Earth, and the 2022 film Living with Bill Nighy. She also played the voice of James Bond's BMW in Tomorrow Never Dies, and she has published 2 novels.
Yeah, she was one of those that I really recognized. I couldn't place her, but it's like, I know that woman. I've seen her in several things. Those are the kind of people who are kind of the bread and butter of Midsomer.
Right. Yeah. Suzanne Packer played Olivia Dent. Now, Packer appeared on over 488 episodes of Casualty, playing the character Tess Bateman for 11 years. Now, only 2 other actors have appeared in more episodes of Casualty. Beyond that, she's also appeared in Brookside, Stella, The ABC Murders, Clink, Bang, Keeping Faith, and most recently Ridley and Agatha Raisin. Now, Packer also helped found the influential BB Crew in 1991. Now, they were Britain's first comedy theater troupe made up entirely of Black women. BB Crew apparently broke a lot of ground and helped create a Black comedy circuit in Britain in the early 90s. Very influential.
Yeah.
Claire Hingett played Lois Springfield. Now, this is only her 6th credit listed on IMDb. Her most recognizable role is Cheryl on the show Stella, starring Ruth Jones. She's also a professional jazz singer who performs with the Graham Watkins Jazz Quartet and the Dave Barry Big Band. Fun fact, before she was an actress, she was a secondary school teacher.
Cool.
Stuart Wright played Sean Delish. Now, he is a successful character actor, probably best known for playing PC Mark Milo in 15 episodes of the recently ended long-running show Doc Martin. He also appeared in Love and Marriage, Bonkers, Housebound, and Ali G Into House. Now, this is interesting. During the pandemic, Wright created a thing called BS3 Santa. Now, it was a form of street theater that basically brought a mini Christmas show to people's homes in the city of Bristol. Like, it would be in their front yard. Now, this became so popular in its first year that in the second year, it was expanded so that rather than just individual homes, it could be done on whole streets. So you would bring them in, like your entire block or whatever, be turned into a one-day Christmas show. He also created something called Date Night, which they describe as a traveling pop-up comedy performance for your doorstep, driveway, or garden. It sounded like he was, like in the pandemic, he was creating this really fun sort of street theater.
Yeah, I have seen videos of those, especially the Christmas ones, and they are really a lot of fun.
Also in 2021, he started a podcast with his friends Adam Peck and Tom Wainwright called Of Spice and Men, where they eat an Indian meal and discuss life. And I want to say, Stuart, we don't need the competition.
I actually love him. He was such a great part of Doc Martin in the first couple seasons. I was so happy to see him again. Let's talk about some of our return visitors. First of all, we have Sophie Stone, who played Jill Templeton, who also appeared in the episode The Sicilian Defense. Stone, who has been deaf since birth, is the first deaf person to win a spot at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts. She's appeared in Doctor Who, Shetland, Two Doors Down, The Crown, and Moving On. In 2013, she co-founded the DH Ensemble theater company, which creates plays that include deaf and hearing actors. I like that the character's deafness isn't used as a plot point or a defining element of the character. I'm seeing this outreach more and more with actors, especially more in community theater, independent productions, where, unlike in Coda, where they do hire deaf actors very effectively, but the main character is hearing, she could be a hearing actress, and she is hired because of her acting and not because she is playing a deaf actress.
Right.
Next, we have Ace Body, who is Tricky Dicky Dent. He also appeared in Written in the Stars. His full name is Asen Bhatti, and Aces was his childhood nickname. He started using it as his stage name because of mispronunciations and puns on his real first name. He played Freddie Mercury's father in Bohemian Rhapsody, PCC Rohan Sidhwani in Line of Duty, and Haresh Chandra on the Sarah Jane Adventures. He's also appeared in Alex Rider, The Stranger, and Grease Monkeys. He also appeared on EastEnders playing the character Yusuf Khan. His character became part of a domestic violence storyline on the show where he began to abuse his wife Zainab, played by Nina Wadia, who appeared in the most recent season of Midsomer Murders. This was a very powerful storyline meant to raise awareness of how pervasive this kind of abuse could be and how it can happen to even the strongest of women. At one point, the storyline has been seen by over 8.5 million viewers. Body does a great job here showing why you should never trust a grown man who goes by the name Dickie.
Our village star of the week is Nigel Lindsay, who played Hammy Has-Been Nigel Bellamy. I'm sure remembering that name was easy. Now, Lindsay started acting later in life after he began to hate his job as a financial analyst. He applied to both law school and an acting program at the same time and was accepted in both. But he chose to follow acting, and the results speak for themselves. One of his first stage role was The King of France in a production of King Lear that starred Tom Wilkinson as Lear and Andy Serkis as the Fool. He was nominated for a BAFTA for his role in Four Lions and has appeared in The Capture, White Gold, Victoria, Rome, Clatterford, and 3 different Helen Partridge projects. In the theater, he's done many of the greats: Shakespeare, Odette's, Stoppard, and McDonough. He even appeared in David Mamet's Speed the Plow, co-starring Lindsay Lohan. But quite possibly, the stage role he will be most associated with is Shrek. Lindsay starred as the ogre in the original West End production of Shrek the Musical and was nominated for an Olivier for it. You can see photos of him in the full Shrek regalia on his IMDb page. Now, Lindsay is also a return visitor. He appeared in the episode Painted in Blood. Now, fun fact, Lindsay is only 14 years younger than Nicola McAuliffe, who played his mother in the episode. I think it's interesting. I just want to can we point out that both mother and son characters are celebrated stars of musical theater.
Mm-hmm.
We never see them perform.
Neither of those, yeah. Yeah.
Even when Nigel is in drag, we never see him once on the drag stage.
No.
Now, we do get that hilarious bit where he comes in the second half dressed in full drag in between sets at the drag show to play around at Domino's and drink a pint.
Yeah.
Which was hysterical. But we never saw him do a performance, which I thought was we're making a big deal about him as this great performer, great actor. Why won't they let us see him perform? Yeah.
You never see him on stage. You do see that really weird photo of him as Hamlet.
It was one of those things where it's just I guess the actor has never actually performed Hamlet, so they didn't have anything that they could use. But wow, was that he didn't look like Hamlet so much as the creepy ghoul character from old Scooby-Doo cartoons.
If it weren't for those meddling kids.
Yeah. I thought the role of Nigel was an interesting one because it's very much the caricature of an actor.
Yeah.
This idea of somebody living the Olivier acting life of the 40s or that kind of big person acting.
Yes. I will go around and quote Shakespeare instead of having actual real dialogue.
Yeah. But we don't see them. You never actually see him doing it again. Mm-hmm. The relationship with the mom thing was a little weird.
It fits very much into the whole Midsomer kind of Dennis and Iris Rainbird relationship.
Very much so. I'm glad neither one of them were murdered, so they could always come back. I thought he did a fantastic job. I was it just was. Why don't we see him he's the whole second half is basically on him making a comeback. We never actually see him perform except for that bit at the end, which was super hammy.
Yeah. I would have loved to have seen him do his drag performance on stage.
Me too.
Yeah. They need to at least put that out as an extra.
Yeah. If they ever filmed it, who knows?
Yeah.
That's everything for the first half, so we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in a moment with the second half of Dressed to Kill. We're back. Now let's get to the second half of Dressed to Kill.
It's not what it seems.
It's everything it seems. Dicky by name, Dicky by nature.
Barnaby sits at home staring at researching drag stars. Sarah comes in and reminds him about Jamie's evaluation, but Barnaby doesn't like doing all that managerial stuff. Sarah mentions that she ran into Olivia Dent, who she knows from applying to the same headmaster job. Sarah was the one who got it, but Olivia apparently remained very gracious, and she also mentioned the play she wants to do with Nigel. Winter arrives and informs them about Malik. Now, fortunately, he was only knocked unconscious when the van tried to run him down. He says he was just going for a stroll when he was run down and can't recognize the van at all. Evelyn thinks the attack was about the drag show, but Malik implies it was something else. Later on, Malik runs into Dickie and taunts him. Seems like he knows what Dickie's been getting up to with Jill. He also might be drunk on Prosecco. The detectives get video evidence that Norinda was the laundromat vandal. She claims that too many of her clothes had gone missing over the years and she wanted them back. As we find out later, those clothes were probably stolen by Evelyn, who used them for her costumes, especially the electric light number she made for the show. No wonder she was scared. At the drag event, Jill has to bargain with Rocco to get him to go, and he only agrees when Shan is allowed to come with them. Jill still sits between them, though. Sarah and Fleur show up as well. Malik opens the show by serenading Winterwoo, and Sean is a triumph with a series of one-liners, even winning over his daughter. Nigel takes a break and runs over to the domino tournament in full drag. He challenges Dickie, but loses. Winter takes a call just as the power goes out and everyone starts running. The detectives find Evelyn, dead from electrocution. Malik admits that the real reason he left London was because his ex had accused him of theft and assault. He relocated in shame, but found a home in the village and wants to stay. Someone is blackmailing him, though, to get him to leave. Nigel admits that what looked like an argument with Evelyn was actually her giving him a confidence boost. They were planning their own production of Romeo and Juliet, and Evelyn's wealthy father was going to bankroll them. The detectives figure out that Chan is Malik's troll. They confront her and she admits to trying to stop the show. She just wanted to save her father from embarrassment. She thought her mom had left her dad because he liked to cross-dress, but Sean never told her the truth, that her mom left him for another man. Now, are those two mutually exclusive? Could be both. He didn't want her to think bad of her mom, so he never told her the truth. Chan had stolen Rocco's phone to do the trolling. And speaking of Rocco, the show raised enough money for his treatment, but he doesn't want to go. When his mom locks him in his room again, he climbs down the trellis to escape. He collapses and Olivia and Barnaby go to find his mother at Dickie's, since Olivia has known the truth of the affair this whole time. Jill refuses any medical attention for Rocco and takes him back to the room. The clinic they are supposedly going to has no record of Rocco planning any treatment there. So Barnaby looks at Rocco's medicine and discovers that he only has anemia. All these meds and the foods that Jill has been giving him have actually been to make him appear sicker. Jill says she only wanted money to make Rocco's dreams of going to Florida come true. But when she told the town he was sick, things apparently snowballed, and she decided to keep the money and go with Rocco. And Dickie. So Jill gets arrested. The revelations at this point start coming fast and furious. Dickie was the driver of the van that tried to run down Malik, saying he doesn't like drag, but he claims he was only trying to scare him. Norinda is outed as Malik's blackmailer. She wanted the drag show stopped because she thought it was going to stop Nigel's comeback, and also she sees that Malik likes Nigel. The detectives discover that Lois voted for the drag show even though she was against it, because it turns out the choice was between having the drag show or Olivia's Romeo and Juliet play. Olivia had attempted to take Lois's position as the council head and lost, so this was Lois's version of payback. And Lois might have also been sleeping with Dickie too. So they rush to find Olivia, who is in the process of attacking Nigel with a knife. Here's the reveal. Olivia, for all her good nature, is a seething cauldron of resentments. Cheating spouse in a loveless marriage, forced to be a drama teacher when she wanted to be headmaster, forced to be a treasurer when she wanted to be the council head. And when Nigel, her celebrity obsession, came to town, she thought it was meant to be her and Nigel. But Lois and then Evelyn tried to take her dream away of being his Juliet, so they had to go. She then tries to kill herself Juliet style, but Nigel stops her with some hammy Romeo lines. In the end, Malik offers to be Juliet to Nigel, and they begin a tentative relationship. Winter gets that glowing evaluation, and Fleur gets one last chance to be Ava Heartburn, this time with Winter promising to be her stage partner, Morgan Donor. So, our killer Olivia is another in a long line of secretly crazy people.
And they seem to be mainly women. It's just a trope that I think they've gone to the well too many times on. It's, let's make this seemingly innocuous female character who does not seem at all like a murderer be the murderer for some deep psychological reason.
Yeah, and it's, part of it is this is sort of an obsession on Nigel that I will say is like it watching it the second time, you really do see the seeds of her sort of obsession with him, her, and I think they play it well, like kind of like you see the hints of the resentment, you see the hints of her like kind of angry at Dickie and stuff like that, but you never see her kind of full blown until the very end. I thought it's well played, but yeah, I agree. It's a little bit too many times at the well. Also, I find it hard to believe that Nigel's acting would have stopped anyone from killing themselves.
At least it wasn't John Barnaby talking her down this time. He gets upstaged, literally, by Nigel.
There's a lot, there's a lot of crimes occurring in this town. Like, I was just thinking, like, at some point, there's got to be, like, everybody from this village is going to be in the holding tank.
Yeah.
The most interesting one, I think, of course, is the Munchausen by proxy that Jill is putting Rocco through. I never quite got why she did it. Her excuse is very self-serving, but did you buy it?
It's always very self-serving when you're doing Munchausen by proxy. It's always about the mother getting attention, and I think it has to do with her husband leaving her, that now she has this child and he's getting to the age where he will soon be going off either to college or to a job, and she has to find some way to remain the center of not only his world, but in a way get some of the attention that she has lost from her husband. Even, she has Dickie on the side, but that has to be secret.
Yeah.
So I think there is some attention-seeking behavior that is always associated with Munchausen by proxy. And it's very subtle with her, but it's still there.
Yeah. Also, do you think Dickie was in on it?
I think Dickie completely knew.
Yeah, because he
seems totally unconcerned when Rocco collapses on the green.
And he's the town doctor. Like, he would be, like, you would think at some point, like, he's going to be Rocco's, like, he's going to be like, well, why doesn't Dickie ever look at Rocco,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think Dickie was in on it. I just never kind of touched on. I thought there was a couple of weird things. So, number one, when the power goes out at the pub, when Evelyn gets murdered, everybody runs out, and then they go back. Then why did everyone run out?
It was really weird the way that was done. It was everybody and John is like, nobody panic. He's just kind of very matter of fact about it. Nobody seems particularly panicked. They're just kind of like weirdly running out. It would have seemed like, and I guess maybe it's just because power outages are not uncommon, but and it was the people in the Dominoes tournament who were running out.
But why would they? Because they all had windows.
Yeah. And they didn't, and they didn't know that what caused the power outage, which was the fact that there was an electrocution. I can see the people,
but I don't think that was the cause of the power outage. I think because she wasn't. That was the thing. Was like the power went out, everyone runs outside, and then she's murdered.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
Yeah. That's the way, because you don't see it and they never really explain it. But the way they said it was just like, well, when the power is out, anyone could have done it. So therefore, she would had to have been killed after the power went out. But then, like, how was she electrocuted?
Yeah, how was she? Yeah, that was kind of not explained very well. Yeah.
Yes, we'll say that politely. The other thing I thought was interesting was there's a great big deal about Evelyn's dad being this wealthy power guy, like wealthy, you know, guy in London, right?
Yeah.
She's murdered. He never comes.
No.
There's at least a day between her murder and them catching the killer.
Yeah.
At one point, you would have thought you'd at least had the dad come in and be like, he never makes, like, they talk about him so much, they just don't. It was like, we just don't have the budget for one more actor. Wigs cost money.
Yeah. Those sparkly shoes aren't going to bedazzle themselves.
Oh, God. By the way, so it's another town and another town obsession.
Yeah.
Do you think, like, when real estate agents, like, in the Midsomer area, oh, you want to move here? What do you like to do? Oh, you like to cut hair? Well, there's a whole village of hair cutters.
Yeah.
The names of the domino teams
Yeah.
were the Spotted Dicks,
Yeah.
the Scrubbers, and the Bone Shufflers.
Yep. What I find plausible is that after the previous, everybody was basically doing role-playing prostitution, they had to have something new come to town, and that was dominoes. Fact.
I don't, look, they just love what they love. It always just seems weird. It's just like, it's never quite explained. It's like, does just everyone move there because they love the thing, or does, like, something happen when you move there? Do you start loving the thing, and if you don't love the thing, you're out? There's a lot going on with Winter in this episode,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like they were alluding to some things that they don't really dig into. The number one being, I felt like they were going somewhere with his sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like they want to do something with Winter's character, or Winter's character, and they haven't quite figured it out yet.
They haven't really given him any sort of love interest the way they have with the previous DSs. Even if it's very much off to the side, there was a lot more with Jones and his love life. There was obviously Dan Scott taking Cully out a couple times.
Yeah.
Unsuccessfully. There was Nelson and Cam. So
I felt like, because there's bits where, like, everyone's sort of hitting on him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's points when he seems to be vaguely, slightly uncomfortable. Like, I even noticed, like the first day his suit, he didn't have a suit with a vest, and then, like, when he does the drag show, he actually has a vest on. So it's like, I have more clothes on now.
Yeah,
I am more shielded. There seemed to be, like, an uncomfortabableness with his sexuality that at the end, when he says he's willing to be Morgan Donor, it's like, it's almost like he's embracing a little bit of a sexuality to him. I kind of felt like, I feel like they're hinting that he's maybe bisexual. I don't know. It felt like there was something going on in the subtext of this episode that they never quite nail.
Yeah, he seems very uncomfortable when Evelyn is pointing out that he has perfect bone structure and buttocks like coconuts, which I have to say is one of the great lines of all time in Midsomer. Then he does, he's very comfortable backstage with the drag queens and telling them that, he tells Nigel that he looks beautiful in a very comfortable way.
We find out that his best friend is also a drag performer.
I was wondering, I thought that might have been referring to Fleur, but I wasn't quite sure. Yeah.
Maybe that was what, then, like, he and Fleur are besties all of a sudden?
I don't know. I wasn't quite sure on that line if it was referring to Fleur or if it was referring to somebody else.
See, that's what I mean. Like, there just felt like there's all these little elements there that they are trying to tell something that I think maybe they decided not to, like, at the end, maybe they decided not to do.
Yeah.
It was in the same way that, like, they're leading up to his evaluation. He needs his evaluation. And then we see Barnaby sit him down.
Mm-hmm.
And then we never see the evaluation. We just hear them talk about it afterwards. It's like, I gave him a glowing evaluation. Well, why can't we see that? Like, why can't we see Barnaby actually doing something nice about praising Winter. They have such a good chemistry. I feel like Winter and Barnaby is the best pairing they've had since Barnaby and Jones.
Yeah.
They have a really good rapport, really good chemistry. I think it would have been really a nice moment to just say, "Hey, you're a great DS, and I really respect the job that you do."
Yeah.
And the way they denied it, it felt like there's something going on in this episode where they were leading up to these things that would have given Winters great moments,
Mm-hmm.
and then they deny them.
But we do have some nice Fleur moments.
She admits her drag career as Ava Heartburn, and we hear a lot about that. By the way, now at the beginning where she says that her former the original Morgan donor, her former drag partner, went on to be the Chief Health Executive of Scotland. Now, apparently that is not the official title. There is a Chief Medical Director for Scotland. That gentleman is Professor Sir Gregor Smith. And I really wonder if after this episode, if he got some messages going, "Hey, dude, something you want to tell us?" I love Fleur. But you talk about a trope of like another trope that's getting a little too much is like every time there's like a weird activity, Fleur seems to have been into it on some level. And just at what point did she find time to go to medical school?
She only has to operate on dead people.
Now,
how many she caused before then, we don't know.
there was some funny incidents of detective work this episode. Number one, Barnaby clearly has no idea who RuPaul is.
Obviously.
I mean, there's a wonderful moment, Winter, like they're talking about the history of drag, and Winter goes, "RuPaul," and Barnaby's like,
"Okay.
I don't know who that is, but I'm not going to say."
Yeah.
What did you think of that scene where Winter's at the door and they Barnaby and Sarah are talking him in like weird evaluation jargon?
That was, I know it led up to the whole "why didn't you say so earlier" thing, and it was kind of odd and awkward. It didn't completely work, but
it's like a dad joke gone too far.
It was like a dad joke gone too far, yeah.
By the way, the one other thing that I noticed was, so when Tom wants to go into Rocco's room and the door is locked, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he kicks it open.
Yeah.
It's literally just like he kicked a door that it was just shut in place, but it wasn't like he did no damage to the lock, no damage to the door frame.
Yeah.
I kicked it and made the knob turn.
Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't even latched. It was let alone locked. Yeah.
So since a lot of this episode, again, is set around a drag performance, Eileen is going to take us to her history corner, and she's going to talk about the history of drag.
Let's take a walk on the wild side. Cross-dressing has long been a mainstay of theater and opera, mainly because women were often forbidden from appearing on stage. Men played the roles of women in ancient Greece, in Rome, Japan, India, among many other places. Kabuki used cross-dressing to explore the idea of switching genders during the Edo period, which is around the same time that a certain playwright named William Shakespeare was writing for his all-male troupe for the English stage. Some of his most notable female characters, especially in his comedies, disguised themselves as male, giving them a freedom that women didn't usually have at that time, while playing with the notion of gender confusion. Exploring the power dynamic of gender has long been an aspect of cross-dressing in entertainment. Cross-dressing has been a part of film since its early days, with Charlie Chaplin and Stan Laurel carrying over the tradition of cross-dressing from their English music hall days, a tradition that has been carried on through Benny Hill, Monty Python, Barry Humphrey's Dame Edna character, and The Kids in the Hall, among many others. In the U.S., Milton Berle and Philip Wilson carried on the same tradition from vaudeville, which continues with actors such as Martin Lawrence and Tyler Perry. The 1933 German film Victor und Victoria depicted a woman who dressed as a man who impersonated a woman. If that seems familiar, it was remade twice, with the second one being the Julie Andrews classic Victor Victoria. The original may be the first instance of drag as an art form on film, though in the 1930 film Morocco, Marlene Dietrich performs a song in a man's top hat and tails, though she was not disguising that she was a woman. That scene was meant to be very scandalous, and it was. Cross-dressing was often used to show deviancy, unfortunately, as in Alfred Hitchcock's 1930 film Murder and his 1960 film Psycho. The latter film inspired Brian De Palma's film Dressed to Kill, title that sounds familiar, with a cross-dressing murderer that is still considered very controversial. The year before Psycho came out, however, Some Like It Hot was released, in which Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis dressed in women's clothing in order to escape the mafia in one of the funniest movies ever made. The famous last line gets a reference in the last scene of this episode. This paved the way for movies like 1982's Tootsie and 1993's Mrs. Doubtfire, the 1988 play Butterfly, which we talked about earlier, and the 1992 film The Crying Game, used cross-dressing and sexual ambiguity as major plot points. Movies like 1983's Yentl and 1998's Mulan harken back to the woman dressed as a man to move beyond expected gender boundaries. Drag as an art form started coming into its own in the late 1800s with its exaggerated depictions of women, and even occasionally men, usually by members of the opposite sex. It was acceptable for rich young men at Harvard to take part in the slapstick theatrics of the Hasty Pudding Club, but scandalous when poor young men in the Bowery danced the can-can. Former slave and early gay rights activist William Dorsey Swann was the first person to call himself the Queen of Drag, and he organized a series of balls in Washington, D.C. in the late 1880s and 1890s, mainly for former slaves who dressed in elegant dresses and gathered to dance. In 1888, he became the first person that we know of arrested for female impersonation, and he is fascinating. I highly recommend reading about him. Drag shows became popular in the 1920s, but were soon forced underground until the 1950s. The ballroom culture also developed in the 1920s, in which African American and Latin American members of the LGBTQ community competed for prizes. From this culture developed the Vogue dance tradition and the recent TV series Pose. In 1972, one of the most popular TV shows of all time, MASH, debuted the character of Corporal Maxwell Klinger, a regular character who dressed in female clothing, often in an over-the-top way. The reason he dressed in drag was he wanted to get out of the army, and it was considered a mental illness to be gay and to be a cross-dresser. And the first time we see the psychiatrist Sidney Friedman in the series was to evaluate him, in which he acknowledged that he was not mentally ill, but he could put him down as gay, and that would get him released from the army, which Klinger refused to do. In 1973, the Rocky Horror Show premiered in the West End and was made into the film The Rocky Horror Picture Show in 1975, with Tim Curry in full drag as Frankenfurter, as he had...
That's Dr. Frankenfurter to you. That man went to medical school to get that degree.
Well, he originated the original the role in the original London production as well. Though originally panned, the movie has gained a massive cult following through midnight showings with audience members in costumes recreating scenes from the movie. It's a lot of fun if you've never done that. This was followed by 1978's La Cage aux Folles, which was made into a Tony Award-winning Broadway play in 1983, and the 1996 movie The Birdcage. It centers on a gay couple operating a drag nightclub in Saint-Tropez. 1994's The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, and 1995's Tu Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar, brought drag into the Hollywood mainstream. RuPaul's Drag Race premiered in 2009 and has won 24 Emmy Awards. Now, in music, androgyny has played a major part in popular music as well. David Bowie, Annie Lennox, Boy George, the New York Dolls, they're just all part of a long tradition that dates back to the early days of drag. And while drag is often associated with gay men, cisgender men also participate in drag shows, as well as women, both straight and gay. The women often find that they find power in the exaggerated presentation of women, more than they find in their regular lives. I've watched some really fascinating videos with interviews with female drag queens. Drag kings are mostly female performers who dress as an exaggerated male stereotypes. The term transvestite is embraced by some, like RuPaul, but shunned by others. And what is really important is that drag has been really at the forefront of the civil rights movement with the LGBTQ community. The Stonewall riots started because of raids of drag performers. And so drag is very, very important to our society's notion of gender, and it like Evelyn explains in the show, it really challenges you to think. So I think it's this notion that it is challenging the stereotypes and the dichotomy of gender that is not necessarily natural, that makes people uncomfortable, and that is why drag is so controversial. It's acceptable in certain instances. Milton Berle was Mr. Television, but a drag queen having a reading at a library for kids is very, very controversial right now.
I think it goes back to just sort of the rise in anti-gay, anti-LGBTQ activity. Drag is just the easiest. It's like you can't walk down the street and just say, well, that person's clearly gay, that person's clearly straight. But if you see somebody in drag, well, that's someone that person's clearly a target.
I think that it's very much something that challenges people's notions of what they are, because if they find themselves attracted to a man dressed as a woman, and this is something that plays out as a trope in movies where a guy finds himself attracted to what he thinks is a woman, it turns out to be a man, and it's
called gay panic.
Yeah, gay panic. And this was played with in The Crying Game, and Butterfly, obviously,
But I think, and Butterfly and Crying Game play with it in a much more interesting way, in the sense of and Butterfly, 20 years, and you how would you you have to kind of not want to know.
Yeah.
And with The Crying Game, it doesn't stop their relationship either.
No.
It just transforms it into something else, which I think is kind of what plays into this final scene. Malik and Nigel seem to start a relationship with using the last line from Some Like It Hot.
Yeah.
But it's Some Like It Hot is sort of it's a punchline to a joke.
Yeah.
There's nothing in this episode that implies that Nigel is straight or gay. There's an implication that he likes Malik, but he also behaves that way towards everybody. And even Nigel says, I'm mostly straight, I think. I felt I wish it had been earned a little more.
Yeah, I see that, but I did like the fact that they tied back to the history of drag and cross-dressing and some of those references they made in this.
Yeah, and although I do think it's like calling the episode Dressed to Kill, and as you mentioned, it is the name of a very controversial thriller by Brian De Palma, where the murderer, I'm going to spoil it for people because the movie's 40 years old.
Yeah.
The murderer is a person with multiple personalities, or like two personalities, one of whom is
he's a psychiatrist.
He's a psychiatrist, and the other is a female who wants to transition into a male body, but also kills any woman that the male persona is sexually attracted to. It was very controversial, and in the trans community, it was not considered a very flattering movie. It was considered very thoughtless.
Yeah.
At the time. I don't know if that's really changed over the years or not. I think calling their episode Dressed to Kill was interesting, kind of leaning towards that past. And yet again, the killer had nothing to do with drag whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it could have been them putting on a stand-up comedy night, and it was still, it didn't, had nothing really to do with it.
Yeah.
Let's do a quick check-in on the home life, because this whole season we saw the return of someone who's been missing. Betty Barnaby was back.
She's back from wherever camp or school or grandparents' house she'd been staying at.
Yeah. Now, obviously, because of COVID restrictions in the UK, that we didn't see a lot of Betty Barnaby in the last season. But obviously restrictions have been lifted. Betty is played by a young actress named Isabella Shaw. She has played Betty since since series 20. I saw something cute online. Shaw seems to really love Fiona Dolman. She drew she drew a little picture for Fiona showing them like as a happy Barnaby family that you can find online. It's very cute.
That's very sweet. And I think having her back grounds the Barnaby family again. It makes them whole. It's nice to see her. She doesn't have a whole lot of lines, but just having her there is nice.
Well, this episode she had no lines.
Yeah, I know. She was in it quite a bit, but she didn't say anything. Yeah.
Okay, so final thoughts. Number one, my understanding is that this season is 6 episodes. This is episode 4, and yet they haven't released any more episodes since this episode.
Yeah, in Wikipedia, they list that they have filmed 2 more for this season. They were both filmed in the summer of 2022. So there are 2 more out there. So we look forward to seeing those. But this is the last one that has been shown in the US on Acorn. Mm-hmm. None of these have been shown in the UK, unfortunately, because ITV is being very stingy with showing new Midsomer episodes there.
Wow, so this is something that our British listeners may not have seen yet.
That is true.
Yeah, I mean, well, they did that. They've done that in the past. Like there was another episode where there was another Midsomer season. We did the episode where it aired, and then it hadn't been. It was a year later that it appeared on British TV.
Yeah.
So maybe ITV is waiting for the full episodes.
Well, apparently they were supposed to show the first episode, but Prince Harry preempted it.
Oh, Prince Harry. I have to say, whereas I think this episode was solid but it needed a little bit. It was it was a little awkward and weird. And I have to say, overall, I have found this to be a much stronger season than the last couple of ones.
Yes, I've liked this season a lot. I think there's been some good stuff in it. The Tom Conti episode, which we also discussed doing, I thought was very good.
Yeah, I think that one was one of the best examples they've done of breaking the format.
Yeah.
And and some real surprises.
Yeah. And then just having more of a larger feel to the crowd scenes that we have not been able to have because of COVID. And I think, again, if they had leaned into it a bit more, into the drag show and the gay characters as an overall theme, as we've talked about, I think this would have been a very, very strong episode because I think their intentions were good. They just didn't go quite far enough.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's if you're going to do a show that clearly implies there's some kind of message, you have to state the message.
Yeah.
You can't be... And I get that in a world where this show is syndicated around the world for a lot of different cultures who have a lot of different attitudes, mm-hmm. that they're probably trying to play it safe, mm-hmm. but in a world where the murders at a drag show is a real thing.
Yeah,
this is happening, and so if you're going to do this kind of episode, then you either have to lean into that or don't do it.
Yeah,
that's sort of my feeling on it. If you're gonna do do an episode that is vaguely. If you're just going to vaguely hint that around it, don't do it.
Yeah,
because it just looks weird.
Yeah, Midsomer is, the producers are very much trying to bring Midsomer into the 21st century, and they have been for quite some time. And they've had episodes where it's been more successful with that. Like I said, if the motive had been around the drag show, that would have, I think, helped a lot more towards making this a more successful episode.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. Well, that's everything we wanted to talk about. We want to thank everyone for listening. If you had anything you wanted to discuss about Dress to Kill or Midsomer Murders in general, please feel free to email us at welcometomidsomer@gmail.com. If you want us to use the email in the show, please say so. We are also Welcome to Midsomer on Facebook and Instagram. If you liked what you heard, please consider subscribing to us or rating and reviewing us on iTunes. It really helps people find us. Also, tell all your friends about us. We will be back next month, so we hope you will join us again. And as we take the road out of Midsomer, we want to thank you for listening and remind you that in Midsomer, playing dominoes can be murder.
And usually is.
Welcome to Midsomer is produced by Eric Buscher and Eileen Becker. All clips in this podcast are used in compliance with the U.S. Copyrights Act fair use exception for criticism and commentary. Our logo and podcast art was designed by Smeedrai. Our theme music is by the infamous Space. Spoiler warning, we will be Whoa, I just enlarged my thing. All right.